Hello everyone, if you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The mirror that lied to me. Imagine waking up one morning, walking to your closet, and realizing that every single piece of clothing you own belongs to a stranger. That stranger is you. And you have no idea how you got here. I want you to close your eyes for just a second. Picture this. You are standing in front of a full-length mirror in your bedroom in California. The sun is pouring through the window. Your husband is still asleep. Your kids are watching cartoons in the living room. And you are holding a dress that you bought last week because you saw every other woman wearing something similar at the grocery store. But you hate it. You absolutely despise everything about it. The color is wrong. The cut is wrong. The way it feels against your skin makes you want to tear it off and throw it into the trash. But you bought it anyway. Why? Because you were terrified. Terrified that if you didn't look like everyone else, you would never belong. Terrified that your accent, your skin, your way of walking, your way of smiling, your way of being would scream foreigner to every person who passed you on the street. And so you bought that awful dress. And you wore it. And you smiled. And inside, a tiny piece of you died every single day. I remember that exact feeling like it was yesterday. And I remember the moment I finally snapped. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special. I was getting ready for a playdate with other moms at the park. I had laid out 3 different outfits on my bed. One was a bright floral top that I thought looked American enough. Another was a simple black t-shirt that felt too boring. And the third was a traditional dress from my country that I had packed in my suitcase years ago and never worn because I was too ashamed. Too scared of what people would think. Too scared of the questions. Too scared of being different. So I stood there, frozen, staring at these 3 options, and I felt my eyes fill with tears. Not because I was sad, but because I was exhausted. Exhausted from pretending. Exhausted from trying to be someone I wasn't. Exhausted from learning English every single day just to sound normal when normal didn't even exist. And then, something clicked inside me. Something broke. But something also began to heal. I picked up that traditional dress. I slipped it on. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself. But here's where the story gets interesting. I had no idea what would happen next. I had no idea that this simple choice would change everything. And I certainly had no idea that the person who would help me see the beauty of being different was already standing at my front door. The doorbell that changed everything. Have you ever done something so terrifying that your hands started shaking, your heart started racing, and every single cell in your body screamed at you to run back to safety? That was me, standing at my front door in California, wearing that traditional dress. About to face a group of American moms who had never seen me in anything but jeans and t-shirts. The doorbell rang. And I swear, it sounded like a gunshot. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I remember taking a deep breath, gripping the door handle with sweaty palms, and thinking, this is it. This is the moment they finally see who I really am. And they're going to think I'm weird. They're going to whisper behind my back. They're going to stop inviting me to playdates. My kids are going to lose their friends because their mom is too foreign, too strange, too different. My brain was a circus of worst-case scenarios. You see, the human brain is wired to avoid social rejection. Scientists have actually found that social rejection triggers the same neural pathways as physical pain. So when I stood there, terrified of being judged, my brain was literally treating it like I was about to be burned alive. But here's what I didn't know. The woman standing on the other side of that door was about to teach me the most beautiful English lesson of my life. I opened the door. Her name was Sarah. She was a tall blonde woman with a warm smile and 3 kids who were already running toward my backyard. And when she saw me, her eyes widened. She looked at my dress. She looked at my face. She looked at my dress again. And I felt my stomach drop. Oh no, I thought. Here it comes. The questions. The awkward silence. The judgment. But then she did something I never expected. She gasped. Not a bad gasp. A happy gasp. And she said, in her fast, beautiful American English, "Oh my goodness. That is absolutely stunning. Where did you get that? I've never seen anything so beautiful." I stood there, frozen. Stunned. Unable to process what was happening. Sarah didn't ask me why I was wearing it. She didn't ask me where I was from. She didn't make me feel like an outsider. She just admired it. And then she hugged me. She actually hugged me. In that moment, I felt my walls crumbling down. I felt 3 years of pretending, 3 years of hiding, 3 years of being terrified of my own culture. All of it dissolving like sugar in hot coffee. And I realized something that would change my entire life. I had been so scared of being different that I had forgotten how beautiful different could be. But that was only the beginning. Sarah and I became close friends after that day. And she taught me something about English that no textbook ever could. She taught me that language isn't just about words. It's about connection. It's about being seen. It's about someone looking at you and saying, "I see you. And I like what I see." That one word from her, stunning, taught me more English than any grammar lesson ever could. Because I learned it in a moment of genuine human connection. And now, I want to teach you the same thing. But before I do, I need to tell you what happened next. Because Sarah wasn't the only surprise waiting for me that day. The real twist came when my husband walked into the room and saw me in that dress. And his reaction? Let's just say it taught me something even more powerful about love, marriage, and the meaning of simple beauty. You won't believe what he said next. My husband's shock. What if I told you that the person who knows you best in the entire world could still surprise you with a single sentence? And what if that sentence completely shattered everything you thought you knew about love, marriage, and being enough? I walked into the kitchen still wearing that traditional dress, my heart still racing from Sarah's unexpected reaction. My husband was sitting at the counter, scrolling through his phone, drinking his morning coffee like it was any other Tuesday. He didn't look up at first. He just said, "Hey babe, how was the playdate?" And then he looked up. And his coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. His eyes went wide. His mouth fell open slightly. And I braced myself. I braced myself for the confusion, the questions, the awkwardness. But instead, he did something that made my entire world tilt on its axis. He set down his coffee, walked over to me, took my hands in his, and said, "You look like the woman I fell in love with." Not "you look beautiful." Not "that's a nice dress." He said, "You look like the woman I fell in love with." And in that moment, I realized something devastating and beautiful at the same time. I realized that for 3 years, I had been hiding from my own husband. I had been so busy trying to look American that I had erased the very person he married. I had covered up my culture, my identity, my everything. And he hadn't said a word. Not because he didn't notice, but because he loved me too much to make me feel bad about it. He had watched me slowly disappear, and he had waited. He had waited for me to remember who I was. And standing there, in that dress, I finally did. I started crying. Ugly crying. The kind where you can't breathe and your nose runs and you look terrible. And my husband just held me and whispered, "I've missed you. I've missed you so much." That's when I realized something about language. Not just English, but all language. I had been so focused on learning English perfectly that I had forgotten that the most important words aren't about grammar or pronunciation. The most important words are the ones that make someone feel seen. My husband's English wasn't fancy. He didn't use big words. He just said what he felt. And that simple sentence, "You look like the woman I fell in love with," taught me more than any vocabulary list ever could. It taught me that English, like love, is about connection. It's about being real. It's about showing up as yourself, even if your accent is thick, even if your grammar is messy, even if you use the wrong preposition sometimes. People don't care about your mistakes. They care about your heart. And from that day on, I made a promise to myself. I would stop trying to sound like a native speaker. I would stop trying to look like an American woman. I would just be me. In all my messy, imperfect, beautifully different glory. And you know what happened next? My English got better. Way better. Because I stopped being afraid of making mistakes. I started talking more. I started connecting more. And I started enjoying the process instead of dreading it. But here's the thing. That promise was easy to make in that moment. Actually keeping it? That was going to be the real challenge. Because the world has a funny way of testing your resolve. And my biggest test was yet to come. It came in the form of a parent-teacher conference at my daughter's school. And let me tell you, nothing prepares you for the moment you walk into a room full of American parents and realize you're the only one who looks different, sounds different, and dresses different. Nothing. The Parent-Teacher Conference. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like every single pair of eyes was a spotlight, burning through you, exposing every flaw, every difference? Every reason you don't belong? That was me, standing in the hallway of my daughter's elementary school in California, about to attend my very first parent-teacher conference. I remember gripping my purse so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My palms were sweaty. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. The hallway was filled with American parents, chatting easily, laughing, using words I didn't quite catch. They were wearing simple clothes, jeans, sneakers, casual sweaters. And I was wearing my traditional dress. Again. Because I had made that promise to myself, remember? The promise to stop hiding. The promise to be me, no matter what. But standing there, surrounded by all these confident American moms and dads, I felt that promise crumbling. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide in the bathroom and wait for the whole thing to be over. I wanted to change into something normal. But then I looked down at my dress and I thought about my husband's words. You look like the woman I fell in love with. And I took a deep breath. I walked into that classroom. The teacher, Mrs. Johnson, was a sweet older woman with glasses and a warm smile. She motioned for me to sit down. And then she started talking. Fast. Really fast. The kind of fast that makes your brain feel like it's trying to catch a train that's already left the station. I caught maybe half of what she said. Something about reading. Something about math. Something about my daughter's exceptional creativity. I nodded. I smiled. I said yes and okay, and that's great at all the right moments. But inside, I was panicking. I was sure she could tell I didn't understand everything. I was sure she thought I was stupid. I was sure that every other parent in the room had a better command of English than I did. And then Mrs. Johnson stopped talking. She leaned forward, looked me straight in the eyes, and said something that made my breath catch. She said, "Can I tell you something personal?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. And she said, "My mother was an immigrant. She came to this country when she was 25. Her English was very broken. She made mistakes all the time. But she was the most incredible woman I ever knew. And I remember being so proud of her. Because she never gave up. She showed up. Every single day. Just like you're showing up today." I started crying. Right there, in the middle of that parent-teacher conference, I started crying. Mrs. Johnson handed me a tissue and smiled. "You're doing great," she said. "Your daughter is so lucky to have you. And your English? It's better than you think." In that moment, I realized something that would completely change my approach to learning English. I had been so focused on being perfect that I had forgotten that perfection isn't the goal. Connection is. My English wasn't perfect. My accent was thick. I made mistakes every single sentence. But I was showing up. I was trying. I was connecting. And that was enough. That parent-teacher conference became a turning point for me. It taught me that the people who matter don't judge you for your mistakes. They celebrate your courage. But the real lesson? The real lesson came later that night when my daughter asked me a question that I still think about every single day. My daughter's question. What if the most important English lesson you ever learned came from a 6-year-old? And what if that lesson wasn't about grammar or vocabulary, but about something far more precious, something that would change the way you see yourself forever? That night, after the parent-teacher conference, I was tucking my daughter into bed. She was 6 years old, with big brown eyes that looked at the world with a curiosity I envied. She had been quiet all evening, and I could tell something was on her mind. I kissed her forehead and said, "Good night, sweetheart. I love you." And then she asked me a question that stopped my heart. "Mommy," she said, her voice soft and serious, "why do you always look so scared when you speak English?" I froze. My 6-year-old daughter had just asked me the most profound question anyone had ever asked me. She had seen something I didn't even know I was showing. She had seen my fear. She had seen how I tensed up when I spoke. How I overthought every word. How I second-guessed myself before every sentence. She had watched me, this tiny observer, and she had noticed that I didn't speak English the way I spoke my native language. I spoke it like I was walking on eggshells. Like I was constantly afraid of falling. I sat on the edge of her bed, took a deep breath, and asked her, "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She looked at me with those big eyes and said, "When you speak to Mrs. Johnson, your voice sounds different. Shaky. But when you speak to me and Daddy, your voice sounds like music." I started crying. Again. Because in that simple, honest, beautiful question, my daughter had just taught me the most important lesson about language that I have ever learned. We don't learn language to be perfect. We learn it to connect. And when we try too hard to be perfect, we lose the music. We lose the humanity. We lose the very thing that makes communication beautiful. I looked at my daughter and said, "You know what, sweetheart? You're right. Mommy gets scared sometimes. But I'm going to try to stop being so scared." And she smiled and said, "That's good, Mommy. Because I like your voice. It sounds like you." That night, I made a decision. I would stop worrying about perfection. I would stop obsessing over grammar. I would stop being afraid of making mistakes. I would just speak. And I would do it with the same freedom and joy that my daughter had when she spoke. Because she didn't care about being perfect. She just wanted to be heard. And that's what I wanted too. The next morning, I walked into a coffee shop and ordered my coffee without rehearsing the sentence in my head 100 times. I said, "Can I have a latte, please?" And the barista smiled and said, "Sure thing." And we had a conversation. A real conversation. About the weather. About the neighborhood. About nothing important. But it was beautiful because I was present. I wasn't worried about my accent or my grammar. I was just being myself. And do you know what happened? The barista didn't care about my mistakes. She didn't even notice them. She just liked talking to me. That was the moment I truly understood that English wasn't something I had to master. It was something I had to live. And living it meant being brave enough to be imperfect. But here's the thing. My daughter's question led me down a path I never expected. It made me realize that my fear of speaking English wasn't just about language. It was about something much deeper. It was about my fear of being seen. And the journey to overcome that fear was about to take me somewhere I never imagined. The first big fight. Have you ever had an argument that started over something so small and stupid that you couldn't even remember why you were fighting 5 minutes later? But then that tiny argument turned into something huge, something that revealed all the fears and insecurities you had been hiding for years? That was me and my husband, 3 months after that parent-teacher conference. It was a Saturday morning. The sun was shining. The kids were playing in the backyard. Everything felt perfect. And then I asked my husband a simple question. What do you want for breakfast? He shrugged and said, whatever you want, babe. It doesn't matter. And for some reason, that answer made me furious. Because in my culture, when someone says it doesn't matter, it means they don't care. It means they're not invested. It means you're not important enough for them to have an opinion. But in my husband's American culture, whatever you want is a gesture of kindness. It means, I trust you. I'm flexible. I want you to be happy. We weren't arguing about breakfast. We were arguing about 2 different ways of understanding the world. And suddenly, I wasn't just angry about breakfast. I was angry about everything. I was angry about the 3 years I had spent trying to be someone I wasn't. I was angry about all the times I had felt invisible. I was angry about all the moments I had held back my true self because I was afraid of being too different. I started crying. Again. And I shouted, you don't understand me. You never understand me. My husband looked at me with confusion and hurt in his eyes. What don't I understand? He asked gently. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't just fighting with him. I was fighting with my own fear. My own insecurity. My own belief that I would never be truly understood because I was too different. I took a deep breath and said, in my culture, when you say whatever you want, it means you don't care. It means you're not interested. It means I'm not worth your time. He looked at me for a long moment. And then he said something that I will never forget. I didn't know that, he said. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it that way. I was just trying to be nice. I was just trying to show you that I trust you. But I see now that we have different ways of saying the same thing. And I want to learn your way. I want to understand your language. Not just the words, but the meaning behind them. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized that my husband wasn't the enemy. He wasn't trying to dismiss me. He was just speaking a different cultural language. And if I wanted our marriage to work, I had to be willing to teach him my language, just as he was willing to learn it. That fight became the turning point in our marriage. We started having real conversations about our differences, not as problems to fix, but as opportunities to understand each other better. We learned to ask questions. We learned to explain our perspectives without judgment. We learned that love isn't about being the same. It's about being willing to bridge the gap. And that's when I started seeing our marriage as a beautiful example of what it means to learn a new language. Just like learning English, marriage is about patience. It's about making mistakes and laughing about them. It's about showing up, even when you're scared, and trusting that love is bigger than your fear. But here's the thing. Just when I thought we had figured everything out, life threw us another curveball. And this time, it wasn't about breakfast. It was about our children. Raising little Americans with my values. What happens when your children start speaking English better than you do? And what happens when they start thinking in English, dreaming in English, and slowly forgetting the language of your heart? That was my reality, and it broke me in ways I never expected. I remember the exact moment I realized my daughter was becoming more American than I was. She was 7 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, doing her homework. She looked up at me and asked, "Mommy, how do you say homework in our language?" And I realized she had forgotten. She had forgotten the word for homework. She had grown up speaking English at school, English with her friends, English with her father. And my language, the language of my childhood, the language of my soul, was slowly fading from her memory. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Like someone had reached inside me and squeezed my heart. I answered her question, but I couldn't stop thinking about what it meant. My children were growing up in America. They were becoming Americans. They were learning English faster than I ever could. And somewhere along the way, they were losing pieces of their heritage. Pieces of me. That night, I talked to my husband about it. I told him how scared I was. I told him I felt like I was losing my children to a culture that wasn't mine. He listened quietly, and then he said something I didn't expect. "They're not losing you," he said. "They're learning to be both. Just like you're learning to be both. And that's not a loss. That's a gift." He was right. But knowing something and feeling it are two different things. So I decided to do something about it. I started speaking my native language at home more intentionally. I started reading bedtime stories in my language. I started cooking traditional food and explaining the stories behind each dish. I started teaching my children about my culture, not as a lecture, but as a lived experience. And slowly, something beautiful happened. They started asking questions. They started wanting to learn. They started seeing their bilingual, bicultural identity as something special, not something to be ashamed of. My daughter, the same one who forgot the word for homework, started bragging to her friends that she could speak 2 languages. She started feeling proud of her heritage. And that pride? It healed something in me that I didn't even know was broken. I realized that raising children in America doesn't mean raising them to be American. It means raising them to be global citizens. It means teaching them that they can belong to 2 worlds, 2 cultures, 2 languages, and that this doesn't make them confused. It makes them rich. It makes them beautiful. It makes them uniquely them. But the most important lesson I learned from this experience was about language itself. I had been so focused on learning English perfectly that I forgot to pass on my own language to my children. I forgot that language isn't just a tool for communication. It's a vessel for identity. It's a bridge to your ancestors. It's the sound of your mother's voice, your father's laughter, your grandmother's stories. And in the process of trying to fit in, I had almost let that bridge collapse. That realization changed everything. But the real twist came when my daughter asked me a question that would completely redefine the way I saw my role as a mother, a wife, and a woman in America. The unexpected beauty of slowing down. What if I told you that the secret to learning English faster is actually to slow down? And what if slowing down didn't just improve your language skills, but transformed your entire life in ways you never imagined? That's exactly what happened to me, and it started with a cup of tea and a completely unexpected moment of clarity. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon in California. The kind of day that makes you want to curl up on the couch and do absolutely nothing. My husband had taken the kids to the park, and I had the house all to myself. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the rain pour down. And for the first time in years, I did absolutely nothing. I didn't study English. I didn't practice vocabulary. I didn't watch YouTube videos to improve my pronunciation. I just sat there and listened to the rain. And in that silence, something clicked. I realized that I had been treating English like a race. Like I had to sprint to the finish line and cross it before anyone else. Like if I wasn't improving every single second, I was failing. I had been so obsessed with getting better that I had forgotten to enjoy the process. I had forgotten that language isn't something you conquer. It's something you live. And living it means giving yourself permission to be slow. To make mistakes. To take your time. To savor each word like a sip of tea. That's when I started reading differently. I used to force myself to read fast, to get through as many pages as possible. But now, I started reading slowly. One sentence at a time. I would read a sentence, close my eyes, and picture what it meant. I would say it out loud, feeling the shape of the words in my mouth. I would write it down, not to memorize it, but to feel it. And something magical happened. My English started improving. Not because I was studying harder, but because I was connecting more. I was actually understanding what I was reading. I was actually remembering the words. I was actually enjoying the process. Scientists have actually studied this. They've found that when we slow down and focus deeply, our brains are better at retaining information. We remember things better. We understand things better. We actually learn faster. It's called deep processing versus shallow processing. And it's the difference between cramming for a test and truly understanding a subject. I realized that I had been shallow processing my entire life. Trying to absorb as much as possible without actually absorbing anything. And that was the problem. The solution wasn't to work harder. It was to work smarter. It was to slow down. To be present. To trust that the words would come, if I just gave them space to arrive. I started applying this to every part of my life. My marriage. My parenting. My fashion choices. My entire way of being. I stopped buying clothes I didn't love. I stopped trying to keep up with trends I didn't care about. I started wearing what made me feel like me. Simple. Comfortable. Beautiful in its own way. And you know what happened? I became happier. More peaceful. More myself. And my English got better too. Because I stopped fighting the language and started befriending it. But here's the biggest surprise of all. The moment I let go of the pressure, I realized something profound about my entire journey in America. Something that would completely change the way I saw my future. From feeling lost to feeling free. What does freedom actually feel like? Is it loud and dramatic, like fireworks on the 4th of July? Or is it quiet and gentle, like the moment you realize you've been holding your breath for years and you finally let it go? For me, freedom felt like the second one. And it happened on a completely ordinary Tuesday morning. I was standing in my closet, getting dressed for the day. But this time, something was different. I wasn't agonizing over what to wear. I wasn't second-guessing every choice. I wasn't trying to look like anyone other than myself. I just reached for my favorite simple black dress, slipped it on, and smiled at my reflection in the mirror. And in that smile, I felt it. Freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from escaping something. The kind of freedom that comes from finally accepting everything. I had spent years feeling lost. Years feeling like I didn't belong. Years feeling like I was too different to be accepted, too foreign to be loved, too broken to be whole. But standing there in my simple black dress, I realized that I had been wrong about everything. I wasn't lost. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I wasn't too different. I was beautifully unique. I wasn't broken. I was being remade into something stronger. The psychologists call this post-traumatic growth. It's the phenomenon where people who go through difficult experiences don't just bounce back to where they were before. They actually become stronger. More resilient. More themselves. And that's exactly what happened to me. The years of struggling with English, the years of feeling like an outsider, the years of trying to fit in, they hadn't broken me. They had shaped me. They had given me a depth and a perspective that I never would have had otherwise. I started seeing my accent not as a weakness, but as a reminder of where I came from. I started seeing my mistakes not as failures, but as evidence that I was brave enough to try. I started seeing my differences not as barriers, but as bridges. Because when you're different, you have something to offer that no one else does. You have a unique perspective. A unique story. A unique voice. And that voice deserves to be heard. That's when I started sharing my story. Not hiding it. Not apologizing for it. Sharing it. I started writing. I started speaking. I started connecting with other people who felt just as lost as I once did. And you know what I discovered? There are so many of us. So many people who feel like they don't belong. So many people who are struggling with language, with identity, with the fear of being seen. And when we share our stories, we give each other permission to be brave. We remind each other that we're not alone. That's the power of storytelling. That's why I'm sharing my story with you today. Because if you're feeling lost, I want you to know that it's not the end of your story. It's the beginning. The feeling of being lost is just the feeling of being between chapters. It's the feeling of being in transition. It's the feeling of becoming someone new. And that someone new? They're going to be amazing. They're going to be stronger, wiser, and more beautiful than you can possibly imagine. But here's the thing. My journey from lost to free didn't end with me feeling better about myself. It ended with a completely unexpected gift that I never saw coming. A gift that made everything I had been through worth it. And that gift was about to arrive in the most unexpected way. My simple life, my beautiful ending. What if the happiest ending isn't the one you planned, but the one you never saw coming? And what if that ending is simpler, quieter, and more beautiful than anything you could have imagined? That's exactly what happened to me, and it all came together on a warm summer evening in my backyard in California. I was sitting on the porch, watching my husband grill burgers while my 2 children ran around the yard, laughing and chasing fireflies. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. And in that moment, I felt it. Complete and total peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from having everything figured out. The kind of peace that comes from realizing you don't need to have everything figured out. I looked at my family. My American husband, who had learned to love my culture as much as I had learned to love his. My children, who were growing up bilingual, bicultural, and beautifully unique. My simple black dress, my simple life, my simple choices. And I realized that everything I had been through, the fear, the loneliness, the struggle, the tears, had led me exactly to this moment. To this porch. To this family. To this peace. I used to think that happiness was something you had to chase. Something you had to earn. Something that required you to be perfect, to fit in, to become someone else. But I was wrong. Happiness isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more of who you already are. It's about embracing your differences instead of hiding them. It's about speaking your truth, even when your accent is thick and your grammar is messy. It's about wearing what makes you feel like you, even if it doesn't look like everyone else. It's about slowing down, being present, and trusting that you are enough. Exactly as you are. Right now. In this moment. That's the message I want to leave with you today. If you're struggling with English, struggling with fitting in, struggling with feeling like you're not enough, I want you to hear this. You are enough. Your accent is not a flaw. It's the sound of your journey. Your mistakes are not failures. They're proof that you're trying. Your differences are not weaknesses. They're your superpower. The world doesn't need another person who sounds exactly like everyone else. The world needs you. Your voice. Your story. Your beautiful, unique, imperfect self. So speak. Speak slowly. Speak loudly. Speak with your whole heart. And don't apologize for being who you are. Because who you are is exactly who the world needs. And that's the most beautiful ending of all. Not an ending, really, but a beginning. The beginning of a life where you stop hiding and start shining. The beginning of a life where you stop running and start belonging. The beginning of a life where you realize that simple isn't boring. Simple is beautiful. Simple is freedom. Simple is you.